G'day, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men podcast. I'm your host, Simon Rinnie, and today we're getting mindful about everything social work. I'm really excited. As a social worker myself, I love talking to other social workers, and I've got Anna Crommelin on the line from the Gold Coast. How are you going, Anna?
I'm great, Simon.
Wonderful. And you're a mum, a mental health social worker, a sociologist, and a social work coach. And we'll be exploring all of these today. How is it down on the Gold Coast today?
Gold Coast is beautiful. I always say, winters are the best time on the Gold Coast. So I cannot complain about anything.
For anyone who's listening, I'm on the Sunshine Coast. So we're each about an hour and a bit from Brisbane in the middle. And we each get to share our own little part of paradise with the beach and the hinterland so close to where we both live. So it's nice to talk to another fellow Southeast Queenslander. But today, it's all about social work and what it brings, and the good, the bad, and potentially the ugly. And I'm really excited to hear about what you do as a social work coach, Anna. But first, before we get into that, tell us a bit about yourself and who you are, where you grew up, and what makes you tick.
Oh, okay. So I'm 43 years old, turning 44 very soon. So that's a bit of a shock to my system that I'm actually in my 40s. Cannot believe that. I still feel like I'm 25.
Yeah.
Might not look 25, but I still feel like I am.
I'm turning 39 in literally 2 weeks, so I'm like almost at 40. So
yeah, it's good. It's a good age to be. Being in your 40s is good, but you still just cannot believe it. Believe it. I grew up in Brisbane, so I lived there for many years, and then I came to the coast, and then I moved to Melbourne for a while, and then I was in Canberra for a while, and then I moved back to the Gold Coast because I just love it so much. And I started my university studies at the University of Queensland. So I did like Bachelor of Arts, and I did a double major in sociology, and I loved that. I absolutely loved it. And I was also managing a restaurant at the time as well. So I love that too. I love the people side of life, interacting with people, even though I'm not fully extroverted. I am a bit of an introvert, and I need time to myself. But I loved that, and I loved what makes people tick, and that's what sociology looks at, the person in society. And I loved learning about all the things that were happening in the world. And then I thought, hang on a second, am I going to have to work behind a desk and analyze statistics? I was like, no, what can I do that brings that learning, but into like a face-to-face situation? And I found social work because I tried psychology, and there was something there that didn't gel. It felt like it was too insular.
Yeah.
So social work really was the thing that really got me passionate, and was like, hang on, this is a really good profession. This is a great profession. Well, that's what I thought in my mind.
Yeah.
I was studying. It's had its ups and downs, though, I have to say, but I still love it.
So tell us a bit about sociology and some of the things that you learn, and why did you love it?
So some of the things I learned, like I did, for example, I did women law in the state. So I learned all about crimes that women commit, what impact that has on society, what society thinks about women committing crimes. I learned about Indigenous culture. That was fantastic. Torres Strait Islander culture. I learned about infectious diseases and how politicized they can be. I learned about all the sort of institutions in society and whether those institutions help people or hinder people. I learned about the power of qualitative research, which I found was fantastic. I did quite a lot of work around sex work, actually, and the criminology around that. And yeah, I did a subject on HIV. It was like such a broad scope of things that I just loved that, but it always came back to how does the person, I guess, react in this society? What influences a person?
Yeah.
So that's what really, you know, I loved about sociology. And if I could work behind a desk, I would have probably kept doing it, because all the sort of jobs back in the day were, you know, government jobs, public service jobs. Nothing was ever promoted that you could be, you know, a sociologist in your own right. You always had to be attached to a sort of government agency. And that was the sort of failings I found at uni. There was no, I guess, push to explore your individuality and give you some business skills along the way as well.
So is that why you ended up in Canberra?
Yeah, I did because I had this idealized, I mean, I've been in social work for a while, but I idealized notion of what it would be to work in policy. And the way that the ad was written, it was with a really big department down in Canberra, and the way it was written, it was all about, oh, I'm going to be in consultation with the public. I'm going to go out there and meeting them and getting their thoughts and bringing that back and turning it into a policy paper and then giving that to the minister. No, you know, it was, yeah, I found that really challenging. I found that environment very challenging to work in, even though I was in quite a good position, a highly paid position. I left. I was like, I cannot do this. I cannot do this. So yeah, it was a bit sad, but I don't know why I was so naive. Maybe it was because I'd worked in social work before, and every day I was meeting people and every day I was in consultation, and I just thought, oh, well, that's what's going to happen down there.
Yeah.
But it didn't.
So how long did you last in Canberra for?
Oh, 2 years.
2 years.
I was done. Yeah, I was done. It was just funny because, like, I actually resigned the job without even having another job.
Yep.
And people just, like, that was blowing people's minds down there. They were like, what's happening? Like, and I just said, I can't work in this environment anymore.
Yeah.
We're not getting the outcomes for people. You know, it's just terrible. And yeah, and anyway, I found a wonderful another social work case management role, and I got stuck into that nearly straight away, and I was like, oh, I can breathe again.
Awesome. So for anyone who's listening and who's not aware of Canberra, and we've got some, you know, international listeners as well as part of our community, Canberra is where the policy and government hub is for the federal government here in Australia. And I went on a similar journey back in 2006. I finished my Bachelor of Social Sciences degree. And at the end of that, I'm like, well, what does a social scientist do? Google wasn't even around back then. So it was like Yahoo 7 or whatever it was back then, or AOL. And I literally typed in jobs for social scientists. And the only thing that came up was graduate programs for different government departments. And I somehow managed to land one. I don't know how, but I got one. And I did the same. So I finished uni and I drove across from Adelaide in my little Mitsubishi Mirage over to Canberra, and I lived in the bubble for about 2 or 3 years. They call it the Canberra bubble because it is a bubble.
Yes.
So most people are public servants there. I'll have these idealistic dreams of writing amazing policy and influencing the biggest decision makers in the country. And a lot of people leave very quickly because it is a bubble, and it is far from what we think it is. But for you, you got out. But for me, I spent the next 15 years in the public service. And for anyone who's been following, you know, my show and the socials, I only recently just quit like two or 3 weeks ago to start my private practice in social work. So it can be a bit of a bubble, and I completely understand what you're talking about in terms of feeling disheartened or disconnected from the community that we feel like we're there to serve. And it also kind of traps you as well, because you mentioned salary. So one of my biggest decisions was leaving a public service job, leaving that safe salary and trying to find my own work as a social worker, still pay the bills and have the kids, fed and clothed and all that. So it's been a very big decision, but for anybody as well. So congrats on getting out earlier than I did. I've been talking about it for 14 years.
But you still did it. You still did it. I mean, that's amazing. That's just fantastic. And, once you feel more settled in private practice, you'll never look back. You'll never look back. But the grounding you got from being in that field, and I say that too, the grounding I got from working in health as well, I would never change the path that I've been on.
Certainly, and I've worked with some amazing people in some very challenging environments. So, I've worked in that multicultural and refugee space. I've been on Christmas Island and worked in the detention centre there. The last 4 years, I've worked in disability space, which has been an amazing ride. And you certainly do learn a lot about yourself and people and process. I think process is a really good grounding because you learn about writing and connecting with people and networking and all that type of stuff. But anyway, enough about me. This is your show.
Was interesting. I didn't realize we had sort of similar paths. So that's really cool.
It is, really cool. Certainly. And I think that's what your work has jumped out for me. Like, that's, I like to connect with like-minded social workers or people in general. And but anyway, we'll hear a bit more about your story now. So tell us about why social work. Why did you grab onto social work and really pursue it as a career choice?
Well, I guess even when I was at school, I was telling my mum that I wanted to be a psychologist. I actually wanted to, work with criminals, actually. I was quite obsessed with that sort of thing. But then when I did a few psychology subjects, it didn't really go with me. So then that's why I switched to sociology. I didn't even know anything about social work at that point. And then when I finished the sociology, I went straight into the Masters of Social Work program at UQ. And the reason why was because I knew I could apply all the knowledge that I had from sociology and the sort of skills that I had developed working in hospitality with people, and I could put that into practice in a practical way as a social worker, but not be so I'm sitting in a room one-on-one with a person. I could be doing policy, I could be doing community development, I could be working in a hospital where I'm around all sorts of different people, and we could work as a team. I really like the whole, you could work as part of a multidisciplinary team and really affect change with an individual that way. So that's what drew me. And then as I started studying, it was just such a natural fit. And I loved the fact that you did placements. I loved placements. That was my first placement was at an Indigenous community organisation in West End in Brisbane, and I got a part-time job through that. So that was fantastic. And it was such a learning curve for me. And I got to do policy, but I also got to do professional development with some of the other Indigenous workers because they own childcare centres. So I was able to provide them some professional development and help them with their studies and, then one-on-one with clients. So it was a whole range of different things that I was doing. And then I was sort of like the CEO's assistant as well. So I was just like, oh, I'm so glad I'm doing this social work degree. Like, this is so amazing. I was so in love with it. I really was.
So you've done a study. You mentioned a whole bunch of different things that social workers can do.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about your social work journey and some of the types of things that you have done since you finished studying and you've been out in the real world?
Yeah. So I always said, I don't want to work in a hospital, I don't want to go into health. And of course, my second placement, I got offered a social work role at the Gold Coast Hospital, the old Gold Coast Hospital in Southport. And from there, I got a locum when I finished. And so I became the renal social worker, working with people with kidney disease. And that was absolutely amazing. I loved that so much. I was providing counseling for people. I was advocating for people. I was helping them, you know, connect more with their families and their communities. I was discharge planning. There was a whole range of things I was doing, but it was too many people on my books. That was the one thing that I realized, hang on a second, I'm really living, breathing this every single day. And I'm really like, you know, if I don't finish at 5 o'clock, I could be here till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. I'm not going to get paid for that. And then, yeah, so I worked there. Then I did another locum at Logan Hospital, and these locums just started happening, like, you know, and then I got offered to apply for a locum in the mental health ward at the Gold Coast Hospital. And I was like, oh, I was not going to work in mental. I was like, no. And this was a very notorious place, I'm going to say. It had not a good reputation at all. And, but I was like, oh, you know, I want to do it. Like, I want all these experiences. So I, you know, took the locum on. Oh my goodness, that was full on for me. That was really challenging. That was when I realized that it wasn't all shiny, happy people. Social work is this amazing career. Everyone's, you know, working together as a team. There was a lot of destructive behavior, a lot of difficult personalities, and I'm talking about peers. And, you know, it was a bit scary for me at times. Yeah. So I then, after I finished that locum, went, right, I'm going to go traveling for a few months. I'm going to go overseas. I'm going to see what I really would like to do when I came back. And then, of course, when I came back, I got offered to apply for an acute care role, which is like the acute mental health team. And, you know, people saying you should apply, you know, people were desperate to get that role. And so I applied and I got it. Yeah. So then began another few years of being in a mental health role, which was not as dysfunctional.
So you went from the locum, and then you had your time off, and then I'm assuming that when you took that time off, you thought, I'm not doing that again. But then you find yourself back in that kind of environment again. So, like, what was the thought process there? Were you hesitant to apply for that job?
Well, yes, I was. But then, you know what? I was wanting to buy a place to live, and I had money and a permit, and I just sort of flitted around for 2 years where I could just live doing locums. And I hadn't had to make any decisions. And I was like, well, I want to buy a unit. I want to live on the coast. I want a permanent job now. And I like some of the people. I knew some of the nurses that worked in that role, and I liked the people. And I said, well, I'm just going to do it. Yeah. I'm just going to do it. So it really came down to, I guess I was yearning for a bit more stability and security, but I knew that doing that job was going to be good for my career in, like, you know, the health sector.
Yeah. And for anyone who hasn't been into a mental health ward in a hospital, and then we might have some social work students actually thinking about doing a placement or even applying for a job there. Can you describe what it's like? Because when I think of one, I've never been in one myself. But when I think of one, I think about what you see on the movies, like, you know, of these psych wards, people screaming out, people in straitjackets, people just getting injections all over the place to quieten them down. Is there anything like that? Or how would you describe a mental health ward?
Look, things have changed since I was there, and I was there in the 2000s. But it kind of is like the movies. It was like the movie for me. Yep. Not people in straight jackets, but there was a padded room that people would be put in there if their behavior was not good, if they were psychotic, if they were being aggressive, and they would have cameras in there and they would be screaming. You know, they wanted to be let out, and it was called the seclusion room. Yeah. There was a lot of injections, a lot of medication, not a lot of, wanting to look at trauma, how trauma affects mental health, not a lot of looking at psychosocial issues. It was very old style. This person has schizophrenia, we'll medicate them. A lot of people against their will. A lot of hurt people, and a lot of staff that should have left that field a long time ago. Staff that were taking on the behaviours of the patients.
Yeah, I can imagine that would have been quite confronting for you early in your career.
It was very confronting. I was lucky that I'd done a bit of time in hospitals because I had seen some heavy stuff in hospital settings.
Yeah.
But that was very confronting. And I was so, I'm going to say like a bit naive and a bit, when you're university educated, I was very much like, I walked into the tea room and I saw all these pictures of half naked women all over the tea room. And I said to one of the nurses, like, we've got to take these down. This is inappropriate for a workplace. And she just laughed at me and said, good luck with that.
Wow.
Good luck.
Wow.
So it, and I tried to fight a few things, and I found that, I became a bit of a target as well. It was pretty dysfunctional, but at the same time, I really loved it. I loved the patients. I loved some of the other staff, but it was pretty dysfunctional. And it was a revolving door of the same patients coming in and in.
So what next after that little stint? Did you go somewhere else?
Yeah, so I this is gonna, I don't know why, but I became obsessed with studying again while I was working full time. So I wanted to do something completely different to what my social work degree was. So I actually started studying a Master of Business Law. And I did that while I was working in the mental health space.
Wow. How was your mental health at that time?
Probably it was, it wasn't as good as it should be, to be honest. Like, I was someone that needed to be doing something and feeling like I needed to achieve and to have purpose. And, I bought a unit. Like, why would you be trying to do that? But, like I did. And look, that course was amazing. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then I just decided that I would move to Melbourne once I finished that. Yeah. So, see, I just could not stay still. That was the biggest thing. I couldn't stay still. And I probably think that was my nervous system, as I learn all these things over the years, was not used to, being in a calm environment, because I'd just gone from working from, I'd always gone from being in like hospitality in like quite brutal environments, then to in hospitals, into psychiatric wards, to then, I'm going to move to Melbourne. And that was, that was also an interesting ride for me. But a lot of my friends were living there. So I obviously was wanting to be closer to my friends. Yeah. Because the Gold Coast, I didn't have many friends here at that time. Yeah. And all I was doing was working and studying.
It's important to highlight that support networks, how important they are to our well-being, to disconnect from work and study life and have social networks around us where we can be ourselves and not thinking work and thinking study as well. It's really important. So in Melbourne, did you stay in the mental health space or did you do something different?
No, I did some policy work for a private company. I did that like for about a year and realized I'm back at a desk again, sitting at a desk. I'm punching out reports. This is not, I did do a bit of consultation with people, so that was great, but it wasn't, it wasn't talking to people like I was used to. And I didn't feel like I was helping people. Like, that was the thing that I really was passionate about. Like, you know, how can I help people transform their lives? And so then I went back into health as well. I went back into health, and I had multiple different roles in health. And I loved that. I worked at like the Royal Melbourne Hospital. I worked at, you know, East Melbourne. I worked at Dandenong Hospital, and I had a great time, and the people were fantastic. And I worked in all fields across health. So I stepped away from the mental health and worked across the fields in health. And that was great. And that's when I really started. I had a role that I could counsel people, like like I was assigned to anyone that had a health related issue, and they could get counseling from me. And that's when I was like, ooh, I really like this. I really like this.
Yeah.
But I still had the multidisciplinary team. I could still bounce ideas off people. I still loved that whole experience as well.
And so what next? Like when did you make the move back up to the Gold Coast, and you're a mental health social worker now? You keep getting pulled back into this area.
So then I was in Canberra for a couple of years after that. Then I was traveling for about 4 or 5 months. And then I was like, okay, I want to come back to the Gold Coast. And I think that was around 2013.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, I had a job at a private hospital here, but it was only part-time. So I was like, I really want to start seeing people one-on-one. I want to do that part-time, because I still was, I still liked, the rush of working in a hospital. I liked the sort of excitement that it was bringing. But I wanted more autonomy. I wanted to be able to teach my clients the interventions. I wanted them to be empowered, and I was always sort of still being told what to do by a hierarchy.
Yeah.
And so I was very lucky. Like, I did my accreditation, and then a psychologist friend of mine who was very successful, she sort of was fielding me referrals, and so I was working in her practice when she wasn't there. So that really got my love for working one-on-one and thinking this is the future for social workers. This is the future for me. So that's sort of how it eventuated, and it was sort of quite a seamless process. Like, it wasn't a hard thing to do, because I had these connections, because that psychologist and I worked in mental health together many years ago in the acute care team. So we remained friends. Neither of us had a lot of time to socialize when we were working, but when I came back, I touched base with her, and then then the ball just got rolling from there.
Yeah, and I guess that highlights that importance of connections in this helping space. Is the people that you work with now can be the people that you work with in 10 years' time in completely different environments as well.
That's right. That's right. And being crazy person that I was like, oh, no, I'll just take on some more work now. So then I got offered like a purely counselling role at Tweed Hospital part-time. And then I also worked with a university being external supervisor. So that helped me fall in love with the peer work with social workers. Like, I was working with students, but then that really opened me up to, oh, I love this supervision thing. This is really interesting as well. So that's kind of how it all came together. But then I got married and had 2 children. So I cut back the work. That's when I realized, Simon, cut it down. Cut it back.
It takes having kids to realize
that
we need to slow down.
Slow down. Yeah. And I've been really good at that. I have to say, because I think it was like, this is something outside of myself. This is something, like, for me, the highest responsibility in life is being a parent. It's our responsibility to try and bring those children up, in a way that leaves them lets them be healthy, because I've seen so many dysfunctional families along the way, and I was like, I can't be racing like I used to.
Yeah, like it puts a lot more into perspective. It's not just you against the world, it's you and the kids against the world, and it's what's best for them. Like if you're absolutely exhausted because you're working 12-hour days or whatever, or multiple jobs, and the kids are getting not enough time from you or energy from you, you're always tired. And I've been in this space when I was trying to work full time and study part time, and then we had COVID as well. It is hard, but it's great that you've tuned into that, and you go, oh, I've got to slow down now, and we've got to actually pay attention to things that are beyond social work and beyond careers and beyond, you know, that kind of identity, and turn on to your mum identity as well. It's an incredible job that you're doing. So you've touched on a few of the things that you like about social work, or you enjoy about social work, and also some of the challenges. I guess it depends on the type of environment that we work in, and you mentioned management and like that kind of top-down pressure, and working in a big agency like health or system like health, where we're directed to do things that we might not necessarily, it might not sit well with us, or you know, we've got to fit within certain boxes, and that can be challenging for a lot of social workers. So how did you navigate that, you know, trying to be a social worker, trying to see the human in people, but also trying to fit within an organization that wants you to tick boxes?
That was the biggest challenge for me, Simon. That's probably why I finally cut the ties with health, because I just wanted to be all about the human. I didn't want to tick any boxes anymore. I didn't want to write my notes the way that they wanted me to write my notes. I didn't want to say the things that I was, you know, supposed to say. I just wanted to throw it all in the bin, to be honest. And so that's why I left. So I'm not encouraging anyone to do it that way, but it is really hard. I found it really hard, and I was lucky I had a good supervisor that I was able to be completely honest about how hard I was finding it. And there was a lot of empathy from them around that too. And there was, you know, a few strategies that we sort of came up with, but at the end of the day, the strategies were not working for me. They can work for other people, but they weren't working for me. And, you know, I've been there. I've been in the health space for nearly, you know, 18 years. Like, yes, multiple different jobs, but at the end of the day, it was still, you know, I'm an employee of this huge monolithic place, and, you know, I have to follow some of the guidelines and policies that I don't necessarily agree with.
And you mentioned that you've taken on a role, or you got into supervising uni placement students.
That was great.
I can imagine some of these themes would come through in some of their learnings. Have you had discussions with them around trying to fit within boxes and working in these big organizations?
Well, see, the thing is, like, I didn't want to, you know, they hadn't experienced, they just probably were doing their first placements or second placements, and they hadn't experienced what all of that was. Like, they could get glimpses, and I had a couple of students that did some hospital placements, but those particular students loved them. And I loved them when I started as well. I loved them. So I didn't really want to, you know, unless someone was really struggling, I just sort of like really encouraged them to be mindful of their self-care. It's really important that you have some good daily habits, and that you say no if, you know, they want you to stay longer, or like you can't stay longer. You have to leave at 4:30. You're a student. That's not, you know, you have family. And so really giving them the power to do that. But a lot of places weren't expecting them to do that. But it was just about, let's focus on your daily habits. Let's talk about any of the ethical dilemmas. And the ethical dilemmas would come up, like seeing other staff, and I'm not going to like say what staff, but other health staff maybe speak to a patient, you know, in a way that they didn't think was very empowering. That was usually a lot of the things that would come up. The communication style of some of the other clinicians and the lack of communication between clinicians, and then this patient would be left there going, I don't know what's going on. So those sorts of things we would work around and talk about. And, you know, that was something that was happening for me as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've only recently finished my degree, my master's degree, and I was fortunate, I guess, in a way that as a mature age student, I had a bit of a gap between my undergrad and my master's. And I'd worked professionally for that, you know, 15 or so years. So I kind of knew what professional environments were like, but there was a lot of students that I did studies with who would, you know, they might be international students or students who have only ever worked in a cafe or a retail style job. And it's very different in a professional environment compared to a hospitality environment, even though you're learning a lot of those people skills and processes. It's very different in a professional environment. And I think you touched on something there. Like a lot of students have the rose-colored glasses on still. They're like, oh, this is amazing. I'm a social worker. But particularly for the mature age students who are seeing, okay, this is not right here or something's not quite right there, it can be challenging to go into placements and not be seen as the person who has that wealth of experience and being seen as a student again, or even seeing an organization from a new lens as well can be quite challenging. And I guess that's where the supervision, as you mentioned, is crucial, is that we can critically reflect on that and talk about what's going on and not feel judged as well. Because a lot of students that I've spoken to over the last few years have felt really judged on placement and felt like they were very small on placement and didn't have a say or a voice. And it can be quite a distressing thing. Yeah.
That's not good. Like I was really lucky. And maybe it comes down to the university and the university culture, because the particular university that I was doing the work for, people were having very good experiences.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that, you know, everything went swimmingly, but the students felt they were being respected. They felt they were being respected at placement. And maybe it was because this university was smaller, it had built relationships with these placement organizations in the past. I don't know, but there wasn't, you know, that sort of sense coming through. But I have heard, just as like what you've said, that people have not had good experiences and they felt disrespected, they haven't felt heard, they haven't felt supported. And I do worry about international students as well. They come here, they're expected to find, you know, their own accommodation a lot of the time. It's so, you know, there's no accommodation on the Gold Coast. Like it's absolutely, you know, we have a housing crisis here. Then they're, you know, they have to work. A lot of them are sending money back to their families as well. And, you know, their English is their second language. And if they don't have a good university that is really getting in there and supporting them and having an excellent external supervisor, they're going to be in trouble. And I have heard that.
And then we've also, I guess, we've had COVID as well, and some students either couldn't get into the country to do their degree or they couldn't get out of the country to go home and be with family as well. So it's been and then the lockdowns, you know, everyone's remembers the lockdowns, and thankfully we're not locked down anymore as well. And I'm even seeing this kind of commentary on part of a few Facebook groups for new social workers or studying social workers, and there's a lot of students trying to find own placements there, or you know, some don't have the university placement teams like I was lucky to have, and or they're trying to do multiple placements or it's really a challenging space. And I think it's an interesting thing coming out of the degree so recently for me and seeing what could have been done better. I mean, a lot of my 100%. Degree was theory based, and aside from the practical, if I was to design that, I would design it completely different. It would be a lot more practical based, with us having the skills to do therapy. A lot of us do social work wanting to be therapists or counselors.
Yes.
And in many cases, you don't actually learn those skill sets.
Unless you do a placement that has
Yeah.
those skill sets, unless you do other professional development. Look, I love being controversial. So I'm going to say I think the university system is dying at the moment. It's in a bad state of affairs. You know, I think it's not supporting students. It is one of the biggest industries economically in Australia. So they are all very profit driven, getting as many people through those degrees as possible. Most of my degree, all of my degree was face-to-face, which is not, you know, that conducive these days. But I'm really despairing at the education that university students are getting because I don't think it's enough. And I think that a lot of people are getting left behind.
Yeah.
And I think they need to redesign it, as you say. It needs to be redesigned because they didn't even teach us any business skills.
Yes. And that's what I will kind of lead into towards the second half of the show today is business. And I mean, you did a wonderful checklist recently that you shared on social media around business, and the response that you got was you mentioned to me a quite more than you thought was going to happen, and what I'm seeing in the
5 people. 5 people asked.
And how many did you get?
About 100.
Yeah, and what I'm seeing is a lot of people want to work in this mental health space, but getting your foot in the door somewhere in a private practice or a community-based organization or even the health system is very hard. And for social workers, to become accredited mental health social workers through the AASW, we need to do something like over 3,000 hours or 3,500 hours of work, plus the professional development, plus the et cetera. And that's just to become on Medicare's books. And then you can get access to the mental health care plans and so forth. So for me, when I'm starting up my business recently, so I'm a recent grad, I don't have that 3,500 hours. So I don't have that source of income from mental health care plans or even access to private health, because they generally would like an accredited mental health social worker. And there's lots of people in my boat as well. So we're relying on things like the DVA system as a generalist social worker. NDIS has come in where we can now provide support through NDIS, which is fantastic. And hats off to the NDIS. I've been asking for it for 4 years, but they finally got a social work line item in capacity building, which is fantastic. But yeah, a lot of people are interested in going into their own business because they want to have more control over life and their time and their money and their decision-making powers and so forth. And you're starting to pave this way. So you're doing social work coaching at the moment. And hoping to help social workers unchain themselves from systems and start their own private practice. So
and I discovered that that's what I like to do through supervision. And also I had met some people that were business coaches. And because, you see the word coaches, it's exploded in recent years on social media and things like that. Everyone's a coach. And at first I thought, oh, but then I thought, well, coach is quite a nice thing because you were there for that person. You were there to get that person to do as well as they can and get outcomes for them. And I like outcomes. So I was like, and I like the fact that it's not this huge power imbalance as well, and that we are kind of working together to help you get where you want to go. And so it made sense to me that, from a marketing perspective, yes, I am a coach. That's what I have been doing. So why not step into it properly and actually start really tailoring my services to those social workers that may be already in private practice but are struggling to get clients, or people that are about to step into that practice, or social workers that are thinking about it. So, there's so many people out there. And you know what I forgot to tell you? Oh my goodness. you're not going to believe this. What I forgot to tell you was when I came back to the Gold Coast and after Canberra, I actually started working with, she was actually a nurse, but she had started a business making bikinis out of recycled plastic bottles. So
that's very Gold Coast.
Yeah, I joined that business and I took over that business for a couple of years. So I became a small business owner and I was selling these bikinis made out of recycled plastic bottles online. So that's how I started to learn about being online and social media, and I managed to get myself on TV about it. So I knew that I was really good at connecting people, marketing myself. Was I good at selling bikini? No, I wasn't. And I realized I didn't like sitting in my office at 12 o'clock at night packing bikinis into boxes and shipping them. I was like, this is not me at all. But I was really glad I gave it a go. So I guess that's where the business, it really started to excite me about business. So then stepping into the social work business coaching, I was like, well, I know about business. I know the things that I totally stuffed up during that time. I know what I failed at and I know what I did well. And so, it's just become that natural fit for me to offer that to other social workers.
Yeah, I love that you use the word coaching, because when I was in my placement, so my second placement was a private practice counselling place, and I had my own caseload of mostly men, or pretty much men. And one of the first things I'd always say to the guys as they walked in the door and one of their first sessions was, you can call this counselling or you can call this coaching. And they all said, I'd much prefer this as a coaching session.
Yeah.
Because there's stigma around counselling and therapy, but coaching is we can do this. We're a team. This is a coaching thing.
Yes.
And even recently, I was on the episode I did with Bart Walsh, who's just over at the CrossFit Games as we speak. He's the head coach of Jets Australia. And he said, you always need a coach in whatever part of life you're in, whether it's fitness for him or if it's business or life, socialization or whatever it is. Coaches just help us tune into where we might be lacking and also tune into where we're doing good, and then try to bridge that gap so it's not such a diverse, scope as well. So I love that you're using the word coach. And you're right, I've seen a lot of bad press around coaches and people using the word coaches, but it's just the name. And if that's what you draw to, then that's okay. Like there's no shame in calling yourself a coach or providing coaching services. I even, in one of these social media groups, I even put out there about a month ago or 2 months ago and saying, I'm thinking about doing coaching. And they're like, why don't you just call yourself a social worker? And I was thinking about the client, not me. I'm thinking a client's more likely to type into Google coach as opposed to social worker. So there's a lot in a name.
There is. And you have the qualifications of a social worker, but you can call yourself whatever you want. And that's what I like, because I don't like this whole, I'm a social worker, I'm a psychologist, I'm a doctor, I'm a psychiatrist, you've got to listen to me. It's not like, it's never been like that for me. It's been more like, okay, how do we work this out together? How do we work this problem out together? And I don't want to be seen as someone up there telling you, what to do, because, a lot of people, when they went into the health system, were being told what to do 24/7 by every single person that had their qualification. And, people were feeling really disempowered. And I just was like, I don't want to be that. Like, I have skills, I have a lot of knowledge about things, but we're a team. That's always where I came from the start in social work. We're a team. This is how we're going to do it.
Yeah, and we've touched on like the curriculum for social workers, and it needs to be updated.
Do
And
you
you
think the
mentioned around
universities will ban us now? That will be banned. We'll be
maybe
banned, won't we?
we'll start our own. But like you mentioned business skills, right? And
Yeah.
throughout my degree, and this is a very recent degree, finished last year, with social workers are constantly told that social workers aren't there for the income, they're there for the outcome, and that social workers don't make money, and that social workers are poor. And the whole time I'm thinking, no, as a mature age student, I'm like, bugger that, I'm here to make some money because I need to pay my bills.
Yes.
I'm not doing this because maybe when I'm retired, I would do it for the love, but I'm doing this as a career, as a profession. And we need to move out of this mindset, which I think has been around for a long time, of social workers they're not so much valued, but from a financial perspective. And I think this is why
We're
people are
not
looking.
entitled to want money. We're not
Mm,
entitled to think about money because we're there to be helpful to that person. Well, that just makes me really crazy because you go into university and you spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. You
yeah,
get a HECS debt. Then, you want to come out and you want to provide for yourself and your family, but you're being told to be grateful because you're a social worker. Be grateful. You should be grateful. And that we are grateful, but at the same time, we have a lot of skills and we have a right to earn money. Money's not a bad thing. Money's just energy. It's just an exchange for your time. You should be paid for your time.
yeah,
And we should not be seeing money as problematic, because if we see money as problematic, guess what we're telling our clients? The money's a problem.
yeah.
And the clients need to be empowered. Like, they want to be empowered to be able to provide for themselves and their family. So I really am in the whole mindset that we've got to shift this perspective.
So can social workers be rich then?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what you're doing with this business. You're helping
Yes.
social workers unchain this mindset of, I'm not worthy of being paid for what I'm worth.
Yes.
Just because I work with people who might be disadvantaged or experiencing challenges in their life, it doesn't mean that, the financial aspect of it is A, for your time, B, so you can put, a roof over your own head as well, but also so you can reinvest in yourself and keep learning and keep growing so that you can help more people, or in different ways as well. It's not just going in your bank account and paying for bling. It's actually reinvesting in yourself as well and your family. And
and I mean, if you earn a decent amount of money as a social worker in private practice, then you can devote a bit of time to giving back. So one of the things that I do is that I do some telehealth for a clinic in Western Sydney, and I just do a few clients there, and I just get paid, very minimal rate for that. But I do that because I have the time now to give those clients who are desperate, who only can afford bulk bill, and I can do that and it's been magic experience. I've been enjoying it so much. But if I was having to be like grinding all the time and like, I need to keep my fees really low, then you can't service the most vulnerable, because then, or you're servicing everyone, and look at you, like you don't even have enough money for your own home or to pay back your debt. So I just think get yourself into a position where you've got enough money that you can then do a bit of that sort of pro bono work.
Yeah. Which, that certainly fills you up from the soul, that kind of work.
Yes.
But as you said, it's self-care is critical to social workers, and self-care is financial care as well.
Yes. Fine. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us about your coaching business and the kind of support you do for social workers, and what they can expect, or maybe they're thinking about calling you. And so, yeah, run us through your program.
So it's really like, it's no video series. It's nothing fancy. It's actually time with me. And that's really what it comes down to. So it's either a 4-week program that we meet over Zoom, or it's an 8-week program, which is a bit more in depth. And it's really tailored to what your specific issues are. But obviously, like if you're coming to me to start your own practice, then the 8-week program is going to be better because we go through things step by step. Then, you know, you can communicate with me via Facebook Messenger as much as you like as well. So you have that support. Like a lot of coaching is like, watch my video and we'll be on Zoom once a month or something. No, it's not like that with me. We speak every week, and then we speak over Messenger if you have a situation. So it's 4 weeks or 8 weeks. And that's really it. It's very tailored to what you need. So sometimes people are like, I'm not getting any clients. Like I'm getting a few, but so one of the things that I will do is like at the start, okay, what is your ideal client? You know, if you don't know who your ideal client is down to what they eat for breakfast, I know that sounds really crazy, but it works. If we can like spend the time really identifying what their characteristics are, who they are, you know, what their issues are, what they like, what they dislike, then you have very clear in your mind that when you go out to those referral sources, like say a GP or a community or a former colleague, or then you can really tell them, this is who I'm looking for. I'm the go-to person for this type of client. And that gets in people's head, and it's also in your head, because when people ask you, it just comes out naturally. So that takes some time to get to that point. And I'm going to be running a 4-week program, like a group program actually, for my first time ever. I'm going to do, but it's going to be an intimate group where we 4 weeks to your ideal client. So that's what we're going to be doing.
Cool.
And
so
then,
you got to niche down. I always heard the word niche down.
You got to niche down. You got to niche down, which is the complete opposite to kind of what we're taught.
Yeah, and I've been going through this. So mine's men's mental health. That's my jam, and that's what I'm advertising myself at the moment with. But I'm constantly worried as a new business owner, am I eliminating 50% of my market by not marketing it to females? And I always come back to what makes me tick, what makes me wanted to do this in the first place is to help other blokes like me, you know? I'm glad you're putting that out and then helping people on that direction, because that's hard in itself, just finding that niche. And sticking with it.
It's the hero's journey. So you have been on this journey, right? And you want to help men that are on the same journey as you. You might be just a few steps ahead of them, but you were there to show them what, you know, what happened in the past, where you can get to now. And by you showing them that you're this person, you're the example of, you know, what it's, you know, a healthy individual. We all have issues at times. But, you know, they want to feel that connection. They want to see, hey, Simon's been on this journey too. Oh, Simon's the go-to guy for men's mental health. And I would just suggest to you, Simon, if you want to niche it down for, like, in your mind, not in your advertising, but, okay, is there an age group? Is there particular mental health issues? You know, what further can you niche down? Because those people will come through your door. There's a science behind working out who your ideal client is. There really, really is. Because if you look at those big people like Tony Robbins and those Aubrey Marcus and even Joe Rogan as a podcaster, you know, they know exactly who they are and who they want to talk to.
Yeah.
And that's why people go to them and listen to them, because they know. So yeah, I just think it's all about that. So work out what your blokes want to have for breakfast, and you'll be sweet.
Beer and cornflakes. No. So what's some of the other things like for a new business, someone who's starting a new business in private practice, do you go through things like how to set a business up, or like systems and all that type of stuff? Like, do you go through that?
Yes, I do. I don't, steer you on one way or another in terms of the systems, but I tell you what I view. That always comes back to, this is what I've done. This is what some other people that I know are doing. But the choice is yours around that, because then I want people to be fully empowered by doing it their way. So I might go, oh, this is the way I do it. And then they start doing it and then that's when they become overwhelmed. Yeah. Because they're just following what I've said, but it's finding what works for you in that approach. But yeah, of course, like, you need an ABN. There's a bit of conflict around, do you need a website or don't you need a website? I used to have a website. I don't have a website anymore. It's word of mouth for me, and it's advertising through Facebook and LinkedIn. Yeah. And I'm on the AASW website. Will I probably get around to doing a website again, maybe in a year or a couple of years' time? But it's really up to you, because it comes down to who's your ideal client group. Are they the type of people that are going to be looking at a website? Yeah. Or even like, because I'm primarily on Instagram. I love Instagram. Yes. But I've started over the last couple of months venturing back into Facebook, because I know a lot of guys don't use Instagram, but they might use Facebook, for example, Yeah, definitely. Facebook is where it's at. Like, I probably would recommend to most people, unless it's a very niche area that they wouldn't use that medium, but I would recommend Facebook and potentially starting your own group on Facebook. Great idea. Now, thinking back to when you first became a social worker, what's something that you know now that you wish you knew when you first started out? That's a good question, Simon. That I can say no. Yeah, that I can say no to things and still have a job. Yes, that's right. Yeah. That sense of empowerment over, your own autonomy. And it's the way that I say no. I can say it in the best possible way, but just say no. Just say no. If it doesn't sit with you, or if they want you to work overtime all the time with no money, like, just say no. Yeah, wonderful. Great advice. It's simple and effective, but something we often forget. We're always trying to say yes and yes and yes and yes. And I'll squeeze it in here, or I won't take a lunch break there, or I won't take a morning tea break. And we want to avoid burnout. Burnout's a very real thing for anyone who 100%. Has experienced it, myself included. And it can be debilitating and knock you out for months on end. 100%. So, wonderful. So how can people, if they want to touch base with you, learn about you, or get in touch about the business, or just have a chat in general about social work and life as a mum, or whatever, how can they get in touch with you? Okay, so you can go to my Facebook page, Anna Crommelin. You can go to my Instagram page, Anna Crommelin, or you can find me on LinkedIn under Anna Crommelin. It's pretty easy. Simple. Yeah, wonderful. And I'll include the link. I'll get the links off you, and we'll put them in the show notes so people can just click on them and off they go. But I've really enjoyed our time today. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day. And I know you've been busy with the kids today and trying to get everyone sorted. But before we go, it's over to you now to plug something, and it can be absolutely anything. It doesn't have to be social work related, something that just makes you feel good, that maybe someone can tune into, whether it's some music, TV, a good resource that you've read, or whatever. What's something that you'd love to share with the world? I would just love to share that at the moment I'm really focused on getting my day right And I got that inspiration from Aubrey Marcus. And he's a podcaster, and he's also very much been involved in men's health as well. And he talks about getting your day right. So if you can get one day right, then the rest will flow. So if you can wake up in the morning, you can do the same thing every day and start those habits, then life is going to be a lot better. So at the moment, I wake up and I do a bit of meditation.
Yep.
And then I am like having lemon in my drink. So just all these little habits that I'm putting into my day is making my days better. And so I would just say, if you're a bloke, look him up. He's fantastic. That's, he's got some really great advice, and he's got a great book to read as well.
Wonderful. I'll grab that link as well so we can share that. I'm keen to check it out as a new business owner myself, getting some habits in.
It's the habits, Simon. Like, I'm really finding, because, it's very, very stressful, having kids and working and starting business. And if you can get some of those habits incorporated in the day, like the energy that you feel, is more, your nervous system is a bit calmer. You're not reaching for the 5 beers at the end of the day, like life is a bit easier. And that's all we need to get to, just being it a bit easier and having a little bit more joy in the moments.
I absolutely love that, Anna. That's great. Great way to end the show. I really did.
Thanks, Simon. It was so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Talk to you again soon.
Very soon. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure that you like it and leave a comment, and then share it with your mates. Also, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a moment of future episodes to come.